In today's episode, we're out here taking a look at the 2017 Volkswagen Passat. This particular model is the 1.8-liter turbocharged SE trim. The Passat was refreshed for the 2016 model year, but much of this vehicle has been around for several years in the United States. Now, if you're watching this video from Europe or certain other countries in the world, you may be thinking to yourself, this does not look like a Passat. The reason for that is that this is the North American Passat. It's sold in the US and a few other countries around the world, and then other countries in the world get a different Passat. That hasn't always been the case. The last generation Passat was essentially the same vehicle in the United States as it was in Germany. But for this generation, Volkswagen decided that Americans wanted something that was a little bit bigger and a little bit less expensive. And that's why in this generation of the Passat, things like the all-wheel drive system that we saw in the last generation of the Passat are no longer offered in the US. From the front view, the Passat certainly looks like a modern Volkswagen. We have this very horizontal grille that wraps on into the headlamp modules, giving this a very wide appearance. Full LED headlamps are available for the 2017 model year. Of course, because we are driving the SE trim, these are halogen lamps, and we don't have any fog lamps lower on the front bumper. Right there behind that large Volkswagen logo sits a radar sensor, because we do have autonomous braking and collision warning in this vehicle, but we don't have radar adaptive cruise control until you enter the top-end trims. Mid-size sedans seem to fall into two different categories. There are models like the Passat, the Camry, and the Accord that are definitely family-focused and rear passenger-focused. That's really obvious when we take a look at this rear window. It's large, it's a little bit taller, goes a little bit closer to the ground than we see in some of those sexier shaped entries like the Ford Fusion, and we definitely have a more classic sedan profile right back here, improving rear headroom. And then we have entries like the Ford Fusion, which has a really slammed rear end look that really reduces the rear headroom, but gives the vehicle a very sexy side profile, but it does cut down on practicality. The overall length of the Passat also helps out those rear passenger accommodations, because this is almost 192 inches long, meaning this is one of the longer mid-size sedans available in the United States. Although the 2017 Passat looks very similar to the model before the refresh, Volkswagen actually has tweaked the front end of the vehicle and the rear end of the vehicle a little bit. The tail lamp modules mirror what we see in Volkswagen's larger crossovers with this sort of L shape going on right in here. And then we have a single exhaust tip over there on the driver's side because we are in the 1.8-liter turbocharged model. For 2017, we no longer find a diesel engine under the hood of the Passat in the United States. That means we're down to two engines. This base 1.8-liter four-cylinder turbocharged engine that produces 170 horsepower and the optional 3.6-liter V6 engine. That's one of the few remaining V6 engines that we find in the mid-size sedan category because for 2018, the Honda Accord is actually losing its V6. Power output for the optional V6 engine comes in at a healthy 280 horsepower. If you get the 1.8-liter four-cylinder engine, then a 6-speed automatic is standard for 2017. There is no longer a manual transmission under this hood either. If you opt for the 3.6-liter V6 engine, then we get a 6-speed dual-clutch DSG transmission. Fuel economy is obviously going to be the best in this 1.8-liter turbo model at 27 combined. If you get the 3.6-liter engine, it's going to drop down to 23. As I said before, all-wheel drive is no longer available in the Passat, so all models will send the power right here to the front wheels. I'm going to give front seat comfort 7 out of 10 points. I do find the seats in the European Passat to be more comfortable, mainly because they're more adjustable. In the American Passat, we don't have a four-way adjustable lumbar support, and the front of the seat does not independently move up and down from the rear. All we have is a motion to raise and lower the back of the seat, and the front of the seat comes up a little bit if you do that. We do, however, have a tilt telescopic steering column. Headroom and legroom are both very generous in this vehicle. I easily have about 2 inches of headroom left. The seat is at the bottom of its travel, and we do have the model with the sunroof. Moving to the back seat, that score goes up to 10 out of 10 points. This is an enormous back seat. You can see I have about 8 inches of legroom left. The front seat is adjusted for me very comfortably at 6 feet tall, and I can actually sit upright in the back seat without my head touching the ceiling. Now, my hair does brush the ceiling. If I move over to the middle seat, my head just touches the ceiling. This is definitely more headroom than you find in something like a Ford Fusion. And if I move all the way over to the right side of the vehicle, the class-leading headroom and legroom are very obvious because this front seat is all the way back in its tracks. I had a 6'5" person sitting very comfortably up there, plenty of legroom going on, and I still have about 4.5 inches of legroom left. In addition, the rear seats are not slammed to the floor like we find in some family sedans. Some sedans out there really push the seat bottom cushions close to the ground in order to give you more headroom without actually making the ceiling more upright. And we don't see that in this Passat. Instead, we just have a more square profile overall that results in a much more comfortable back seat. Rear passengers get a fold-down center armrest with 2 cup holders. We also have rear air vents back here and a USB charge point. The rear seats fold in a 60-40 fashion, but you do have to do that from the trunk. There's no lever on the inside of the vehicle if you want to fold the seats. Behind the trunk lid, we find just under 16 cubic feet of storage space, which definitely puts this among the largest cargo areas in this category. The cargo area is large and it's also very square. That really helps us out with the 24-inch roller bags, but also with this 22-inch roller bag, you can see that scoots quite far back there in the trunk, all the way to that back seat. That means you could actually put more 22-inch roller bags in this position or even in this position in the trunk. If we lift up the load floor, you'll notice that we have something of a missed opportunity back here in the trunk. This model has a donut spare tire, and then we have these large foam inserts here on either side. That eats up about 5 inches of trunk depth, where they could have put a cargo divider or some other cargo holder, or they could have made the bulk of this cargo area about 5 inches deeper. That would have meant that a 22-inch roller bag could have fit in this upright position right back here in the trunk, very much like we see in the Nissan Altima, but because of the trunk's dimensions, you can't do that. You'd have to either put it on its side there or stack them in some other way. As we look around the interior, keep in mind that we are in the SE trim, which is sort of a midline trim for the Passat. Our model has the optional sunroof. We also have height adjustable seatbelts for the driver and the front passenger, and 2-way adjustable headrests. The seats in our particular model are not leather. They're actually an imitation leatherette. These don't breathe quite as well as real leather seats, however they are perforated to help out a little bit. The front doors are made from a combination of hard and soft touch plastics. We have a soft touch upper section of the door. The majority of the door panel is a hard plastic, and then we have a soft insert right here for the armrest. Although there have been Passat models sold in the United States with real wood trim, we don't find that in the 2017 Passat, although this is a believable imitation. As we pan from one side of the dashboard to the other side, Volkswagen's very conservative design theme should be very obvious. Things are very upright, fairly square, and definitely very horizontal. Be sure and let me know what you think about the design down there in the comment section, both inside and outside. If it sounds like I'm down on the design of the Passat, then I'm giving you the wrong impression. This design is definitely restrained, it's definitely elegant, and some people might think that it's a little bit older, but I actually think it's attractive, and I also think it's going to age better than some of those other mid-size sedan designs that we see. On the passenger side, we find a large slot and bin-style glove compartment. There's a large bin here, and there's also a slot where you can put the instruction manual just above it. In the center of the dashboard, we find 2 large air vents and an analog clock, and then below that we have the touchscreen infotainment and navigation system. The model that we're driving does not feature factory navigation, but we do have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto integration. There's an SD card slot on the left side right here, and then we have direct access buttons to our radio, media, phone, voice interfaces, etc. One interesting touch with this particular system is that you find the Apple CarPlay interface right here under the menu option. You don't find it in media where some of the other manufacturers put it. Below the touchscreen on camera, you may notice these 4 little dots right here. These are IR emitters. They're not visible to the naked eye, but the camera does see them. This is part of the proximity detection system in this radio unit, because some screens in the radio will have a little bar that pops up if your hand gets close to the screen, and then as your hand comes away, it'll actually disappear. Below the infotainment system, we find the standard 2-zone climate control system, and then we have a storage cubby right in front of the shifter where I was barely able to fit my iPhone 7 Plus inside. There's a USB interface port and an auxiliary input there as well. Continuing behind that, we find the engine start-stop button and a fairly traditional console shifter. Sport is all the way to the back, drive is 1 notch in front of that. If you want the manual mode, you push it over to the right, push away from the driver for gear up, pull towards the driver for gear down. Between the front seats, we have a traditional handbrake, 2 large cup holders, and again, more of that imitation wood trim. The center armrest is padded. It slides forward and backward. It also lifts up out of the way to reveal a moderately sized storage cubby. We also have a 12-volt power port. There's definitely enough room there for wallets and other items. This is what the key looks like in this generation of the Passat. It is sort of a switchblade style, even though we do have the keyless drive. On the driver's side, we have a 4-dial instrument cluster with a monochromatic multifunction display in the middle. The multifunction display should be familiar if you've driven any of VW's other products. We have an audio interface screen, Unfortunately, we don't have Apple CarPlay track information when we're on that particular screen. You'll also notice that we have a phone screen right here, but again, we don't have the same kind of information that we would if we had a Bluetooth phone paired versus using CarPlay. You can enable and disable the vehicle assistance systems like the rear cross traffic detection, blind spot monitoring, etc. You can adjust certain vehicle settings, and we also have access to our usual trip computer interface. Moving out from there, we have a 3-spoke steering wheel with a slight flat bottom, very similar to what we see in the GTI. We have sport grips up top. You'll find the cruise control buttons over here on the left side, along with the volume up, down. And then on the right side, we have track forward, backward. And then we have the controls for that multifunction display, in addition to a voice command button and a phone button right there. The silver buttons allow you to move between different pages in that multifunction display. We toggle up and down to select options, and then OK to enter. A number of our Facebook followers asked me to comment on the position of the steering wheel relative to the driver's seat. It may not be very obvious from the video right here, but where my legs are, but the steering wheel is actually shifted about 1 inch to the right of the vehicle, towards the center line. Having the steering wheel not centered with the driver's seat is not necessarily unusual. There are a number of vehicles in the US where the steering wheel is not perfectly in line with the driver's seat. However, there are few vehicles in the US where the steering wheel is this far offset. It means that we get a little bit more room over here on the left side of the vehicle. You notice how large that air vent is and how much room there is between the steering wheel and the door for that headlamp switch, etc. Having the steering wheel this far away from the door may make it easier for taller folks to get in and out of the vehicle without bashing your knees on the wheel, but it does mean that if you like to drive with your elbow on the windowsill, the steering wheel may be a little bit far away. The turbocharged engine helps the Passat feel a little peppier than its numbers would otherwise indicate. We ran from 0 to 60 in this 1.8T model in 8 seconds flat. That is a little bit behind the Accord and the Altima, which will do it right around 7.2, 7.3 seconds. But the way that this gets from 0 to 60 feels different than the Accord and the Altima because those use continuously variable transmissions. This uses a traditional stepped automatic. Of course, if you want to go from 0 to 60 in one of the best times in this segment, you can get the Passat with that V6 engine. And thanks to its 6-speed dual-clutch automatic, it will go from 0 to 60 right around 5.6, 5.7 seconds. That is definitely one of the faster models in this segment. In our 60 to 0 braking test, this model took 124 feet to stop. That's just about the same as a mid-level Honda Accord. It's all down to the tire size. The model that we're driving has 215/55 R17 tires on it. That's a very average tire size for the mid-size American sedan category, and the Passat's weight is relatively in line with the mainstream competitors. Last time we tested the Passat, it had 235 with tires on it, and that took about 117 to 118 feet to stop from 60 back to 0. That's a very good score for this category. Because of the tire size we have in this particular trim, I'm going to have to give handling a B. Handling feel and overall handling ability is good for this category compared to vehicles with like tires on them, but you will definitely find better handling scores in top-end trims of the competition or top-end trims of the Passat, because again, top-end trims will get the 235 with tires. It's going to handle much better than the model that we're driving. Because we're driving the SE trim, we have 55 series 17-inch tires on this vehicle. That gives us a little bit more cushion than we find in the top-end trims. As I said earlier, of course, the trade-off for these narrower tires is that it does reduce handling versus the wide 235 with tires that we see in top-end trims. But it does mean that we have a more cushy, more comfortable ride, especially on long highway trips. Driving out on this gravel road, this is a little bit firmer than some of the softest entries in this segment, like certain trims of the Toyota Camry. That means that more of the minor road imperfections come through into the cabin than we find in certain trims of the Camry, but this is not as harsh or as unforgiving as certain trims of the Ford Fusion. At 50 miles an hour, we registered 72 decibels in terms of cabin noise, so I'm going to give this a B. It is fairly quiet for this category, but there are definitely quieter entries. Over a week of very mixed driving, we have been averaging above the EPA's estimated 27 mpg for this vehicle. We've been averaging 27.5. Therefore, when it comes to our overall fuel economy score, I'm going to give this an A. This is just about as efficient as many of the CVT-equipped entries in this segment, but thanks to the turbocharged engine and the 6-speed automatic, this is much more engaging to drive. Now that said, this is not as engaging to drive as the European Passat. I had the opportunity to drive one last year, and it is definitely more engaging than the American Passat. And that's a little bit of a pity because the Passat had for a long time been the discount Audi in America. And in fact, certain versions of the Passat were very, very closely related to key Audi models of similar sizes. But that's not the case in this generation of the Passat. Don't take that to mean that this car handles like a wet noodle. It doesn't. But it isn't as engaging as a Mazda 6 out on the road. It's a little bit faster 0 to 60 than a comparable Mazda, but it doesn't feel quite as engaging on the road. We don't get quite as much feedback from the front tires. It's a little bit harder to tell exactly what the front suspension is doing, and the rear suspension gets a little bit more upset in the corners. That's not what we see in the European Passat, but it is what we see in the American Passat. The reason for that, of course, is that the American Passat is targeted directly at the Camry and the Accord, and the European Passat has a very different kind of competitor. The mid-size sedan and the compact crossover markets are two of the most competitive segments in the United States. So it's really no wonder that basically every mid-size sedan in America starts right around $22,500. The difference tends to be what you get for your $22,500. In the Passat, we get standard autonomous braking, a standard turbocharged engine, dual-zone climate control, and of course, the automatic transmission. Things are a little bit different if we take a look at, for instance, the Honda Accord, which starts right about the same price, but has a manual transmission for that base price, but you get a few more features and goodies in the Accord, but you do have to give up the automatic. The brand new Toyota Camry, on the other hand, has a starting price that's about $1,000 higher than the S trim you're looking at on this list, but it does come standard with radar adaptive cruise control. If you want an interior that looks more like the model that we've been driving this week, you have to step on up into the R-Line trim at least, because that will give you Apple CarPlay and Android Auto on the larger LCD infotainment screen nestled into the dashboard. If you want radar adaptive cruise control, which you will find standard on the Camry and optional on the Accord in very low trims, then you'll have to spend about $28,000 for the SE Tech model. On the other hand, Volkswagen does make their V6 engine very inexpensive because you can get it for just under $30,000 in the V6 with Tech package, but you won't find a V6 in the Toyota Camry until just about $35,000, so it is a pretty significant price difference. Now let's move on to the likes and dislikes. Even though Passat is getting a little bit old, I'm going to put that under the dislike section, I actually think it is still one of the more attractive sedans in this category. I like the elegant and reserved styling both inside and out in the Passat. Be sure and let me know what you think about it down there in the comment section below. The affordable V6 engine is also a strong pro for the Passat, as is, I think, the 6-speed dual-clutch transmission that V6 comes with. Not everybody likes the way a dual-clutch transmission shifts. It's not going to be as smooth as a traditional automatic transmission, but it is going to be faster shifting. Value is also a strong suit for the Passat. Not only does it have one of the lower starting prices in this segment, but it's only $200 more expensive than a Kia Optima, which is typically one of the less expensive options. And the V6 gives you one of the best acceleration times for the lowest price tag in this segment. It's about $600 less than an Optima with its 2-liter turbo engine, $1,000 less than most of the 2-liter turbos we find in this segment, and about $5,000 less expensive than a V6 Toyota Camry. Downsides for the Passat include handling, although handling in the upper end trims is a little bit more competitive. In some of the mid-range trims you will definitely find a better handling vehicle in the Mazda 6 or in the Honda Accord. Even the Toyota Camry in many trim levels will out-handle the Passat. The Volkswagen also seems to be a little bit behind the times when it comes to gadgets, but it does fight back with an absolutely enormous rear seat. That brings us along to the Honda Accord. Because this segment is so competitive, we see manufacturers like Honda refreshing their vehicles very frequently and bringing out all new vehicles quite frequently as well. And that's exactly what we see with the 2017 to the 2018 Honda Accord, because it really wasn't that long ago that the Accord received a major refresh inside and out, but for 2018 we're actually getting an all-new Accord. As a result of how Honda refreshes their products, the basis of the Honda Accord for 2017 is just about as old as the basic bones that we find in the Passat. However, it definitely feels fresher inside the cabin and outside the cabin. The Accord also is an extraordinarily well-rounded vehicle. We have excellent passenger room, it provides excellent handling, decent acceleration, and class-leading fuel economy. Rear seat accommodations, however, are a definite win for the Passat because it does feel more spacious than the Accord. At this time, we don't know too much about the 2018 Honda Accord because Honda has just started releasing some of the details about that model. We don't expect to see it in dealer showrooms until quite a bit later this year. One of the things we do know, however, is that Honda is going all in on turbocharged engines, and there will no longer be a V6 available in that Accord. So if you're looking for a V6, it does seem to be a dying breed, but you will still find one in the Passat. And the Passat's V6 is one of the best in the segment. That said, if you're looking for the best acceleration and a combination of excellent acceleration and excellent fuel economy, keep an eye on the Nissan Altima with the 3.5-liter V6 or the Honda Accord with its new 2-liter turbo and the 10-speed automatic. Next up, we have another 800-pound gorilla, the all-new Toyota Camry. We recently got our hands on the Toyota Camry, so be sure and stay tuned for that review coming up very soon. The big thing to know about the new Camry is that Toyota has gone all in on active safety. The Camry, just like the Toyota Highlander, has standard radar adaptive cruise control, standard autonomous braking, standard pedestrian detection, auto high beams, and lane keeping assistance. That's all part of Toyota's move to push those technologies into every vehicle that they sell. That's a little bit different than we see in the Honda Accord, because in the Honda Accord for 2017, those are optional even on low-end trims, but you do have to check the option box. On the Toyota Camry, they're all standard. The Backseat is still a slight win for the Passat, although the Camry, the Accord, and the Passat all have some of the most accommodating back seats in this group. Vehicles like the Chrysler 200, the Ford Fusion, or even the Subaru Legacy have a much more compact back seat, especially when it comes to the real-world headroom figures. And that's all because of the way that those manufacturers have decided to shape their cars. Meanwhile, the Camry, the Passat, and the Accord continue to have a more upright posture in the back that allows us to have more headroom. Toyota has really surprised me lately because they're checking all the right boxes for an American mid-size sedan. The Camry should be very reliable. It has Toyota's brand new 8-speed automatic transmission and an all-new V6 with over 300 horsepower. The new V6 and the 8-speed automatic should give class-leading acceleration in that model. We also have an all-new hybrid system that no longer takes up extra trunk space. So if you're looking for the best in fuel economy with few compromises, the all-new 2018 Camry should definitely be on your shopping list. On the downside, the base model of the Camry, and that would be just the base model, does have a strangely small trunk at 14.1 cubic feet. Perhaps the biggest thing about the Camry is that Toyota has really worked hard to shed the boring label that the Camry has long been saddled with. The new 2018 Camry is much more exciting than the outgoing model. Next up, we have the Nissan Altima. It's really defined by good fuel economy, inexpensive trims, and an enormous trunk. You might be thinking to yourself, on paper the Altima's trunk doesn't seem that much bigger than some of the other mid-sized sedans, but it all comes down to the shape. Nissan tends to design their cargo areas very square and very tall, and that allows you to put larger roller bags in their upright position in the trunk and still close the trunk lid. That means that you can put more 22-inch roller bags in the Altima than just about any other mid-size sedan. On the downside, handling dynamics still trail behind the competition for the Altima. It's definitely behind the Passat, it's also behind the Camry and the Accord. You also won't find Apple CarPlay or Android Auto inside the Altima. Nissan has said that they're going to be providing those features in the future, but we really don't know when they're going to trickle down to their more mainstream cars. You should also know that the Altima is an all-CVT car, so even that 3.5-liter V6 gets a continuously variable transmission. Now that CVT does enable the 3.5-liter V6 version of the Altima to go from 0 to 60 incredibly fast for this segment, but it's not going to feel as engaging as anybody else's automatic. It's also not going to feel as engaging as the CVT that we find in the Honda Accord. Honda has one of the best CVTs in the business, and the one that we see in the Altima is just not as engaging. Next up, we have the Chevy Malibu. This is one of the largest mid-size sedans in America, but oddly enough, the exterior dimensions don't really seem to translate into the largest interior in the segment, or the largest trunk. Although on paper, the Malibu's 2-liter turbo produces notably less power than we find out of the Passat's V6, it'll actually go from 0 to 60 just about as fast, or perhaps slightly faster. That's mainly thanks to the turbocharger and the 9-speed automatic. The 9-speed automatic that we find in the Malibu is definitely an asset. This is not the same 9-speed that you've seen in Acuras or in FCA vehicles. This is an all-new 9-speed design that was co-developed by Ford and General Motors. The 9-speed auto in the Malibu shifts more like the 8-speed that we find in the Toyota Camry. It's definitely one of the smoother front-wheel drive transmissions. My bottom line at the moment is that my top pick for mid-size American sedan is the all-new Toyota Camry. The Toyota Camry has managed to take the crown away from the Kia Optima plug-in hybrid and the Honda Accord because of how well-rounded that model is. The Camry handles well, the fuel economy is good, it's likely going to be very reliable, and the Camry's new 8-speed automatic is definitely an asset to that vehicle. If you want to go faster, there's also that over 300 horsepower V6, which is quite surprising for Toyota. The Altima plug-in is still high on my list because of the excellent fuel economy and the fact that if you qualify for the federal rebates, it becomes a very good buy in this segment as well. The Passat is still a solid car, but this segment is so cutthroat that when all the numbers are tallied, it does end up falling behind the Camry, the Accord, the Altima, the Sonata, and even the Malibu. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2017 Volkswagen Passat. Be sure and comment down there in the comment section below. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done so. You can find us over at facebook.com/AlexOnAutos, and you should also head over to patreon.com and find us over there if you want to support this channel. I'll see you next week.